Well, good morning. Well, this microphone really works. Thank you, Stephen. um, so today, I should also confess that when I chose this passage, it didn't fall on Mother's Day. So if you see that it's not going to be really related to Mother's Day, so that's just my apology. But let me start by asking this question. Who among you would say that Mondays are your favorite day of the week? Okay, not many. That's what I thought. So most likely your favorite day of the week falls on the weekend, right? Somewhere there. And that's pretty common. And it could be also true that some of us will experience later today, as the evening approaches, some sense of dread or anxiety as Monday approaches, thinking of the work week. And that's common in that it's called the Sunday evening blues. I don't know if you knew about that. I just recently learned about that. And some of us would experience that on a weekly basis, right? See some people nodding and smiling. It could be strongly or just mildly. And however, there are certain moments in our lives when we experience that drop from a high excitement like the weekend to a low point like the start of the week, but on a much bigger scale, not just Sunday to Monday, but something bigger. It could be that you come back from a big achievement, you just graduated, you just achieved a major project at work that you were working on, or even you just came from a vacation and it was wonderful, and now you just come back to your regular life and you experience that drop from excitement to a low point. That is also normal. I learned that it's called post-achievement depression or post-success downer. And we go through that several times in our life. I don't know if you can remember one time in your life when maybe you experienced something like that. You were working towards a goal, and you think when you get there, that's going to be great. But then you get there, maybe you finish school, you finish a project, you get a job, you get a new house, and then it becomes normal again, and maybe you experience like some sort of low in your life again, and that's normal. So today, as we continue with our series on Jesus Encounter, I chose one from the Old Testament. And I like this story. It's Elijah's story in 1 Kings 19. It's a very well-known story, and I always liked it because the same as the story of Job, David, and Joseph, and many others, it doesn't hide the reality of human suffering, that even faithful servants of the Lord will experience low points in their lives. So we're going to read this story in 1 Kings 19. We may have it in the screen for you, the text, but if you also want to open your Bibles in 1 Kings 19. So I'm going to read the text, the first 8 verses. And it says, Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done and how he had killed all the prophets with the sword. Then Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah saying, So may the gods do to me and more also if I do not make your life as the life of one of them by this time tomorrow. Then Elijah was afraid, and he arose and ran for his life and came to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah, and left his servant there. But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness, and came and sat down under a broom tree. And he asked that he might die, saying, It is enough now, O Lord, take away my life, for I am no better than my fathers. And he lay down and slept under a broom tree, and behold, an angel touched him and said to him, Arise and eat. And he looked, and behold, there was at his head a cake baked on hot stones and a jar of water. And he ate and drank and lay down again. Then the angel of the Lord came again a second time and touched him and said, Arise and eat, for the journey is too great for you. And he arose and ate and drank and went in the strength of that food 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, the mount of God. So the first thing that we're going to see is we're going to see how God takes care of Elijah in this case by doing three different things that maybe we wouldn't expect. And the first thing that we see in these first 8 verses is how God provides for our needs. So just to set the context, you probably know the story, but Elijah came from a contest in Mount Carmel between the prophets of Baal. There were 450 men, and then him, that was the only one, the only faithful servant of the Lord. So if you remember the story, the setting was whoever God answers by fire in the altar, that is the true God. So God replied with fire in Elijah's altar, and then all the people saw that, and the 400 prophets of Baal were killed. So it was a great victory and a great success for Elijah. You could say it was one of the highest points in his ministry. But shortly after this, the king of Israel, Ahab, who it tells 1 Kings 16 that he was even worse than all the other kings before him. So he just went back to his home, told his wife, and then they sent a messenger to Elijah, assuring him, "You are going to die within a day." What does Elijah feel after this great victory? He felt afraid. It says he ran for his life. He ran 100 miles south to a town called Beersheba. And in case that distance wasn't enough, he went an extra day into the desert. He left his servant, went an extra day into the desert, and then he hid there in the wilderness so that they didn't find him. Then he sat under a tree, and what does he do? He asks God, "Just take away my life. It's enough. I'm no better than my fathers. Just take my life. I don't want to continue doing this." So Elijah had recently witnessed a powerful act from God. He has seen the miracle of God answering through fire in the altar. And he experienced that height and defeating all the prophets of Baal. And then now he's at his lowest point. He wants to die and give up. How is that contrast? We can empathize with Elijah and feel that he probably expected people to have a different reaction. All the people of Israel were gathered around the mount, and they witnessed that miracle. But when that happened, they just went on with their lives. The king went back to his home, and then they sent a messenger telling him, "You're going to die for what you've done." So it was really a big disappointment, and he felt like his ministry was just a failure. So he just basically wanted to give up and die. And how would you expect God to respond in that case? Maybe with some words of encouragement or some correcting his perspective that was somehow not clear. But at this point, what God does is he doesn't say a word. If you notice, he sent an angel. And what did the angel do? He provided for his basic needs. He gave him bread and water, and Elijah also had a nap. Then the second time, Elijah slept. Then the angel touched him again, "Arise and eat, because you have a long journey ahead of you." And then, strengthened with that food, he was able to continue in that journey that God had prepared for him. So I recently came across to an acronym. I don't know if you know this one. HALT, H-A-L-T. Does anybody know what it stands for? Okay. Yeah.
Hungry, angry, lonely, tired.
Yes, hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. And it's an acronym to help us identify those emotional states in which we're more vulnerable to make rash decisions, to not think clearly. So when you're in one of those 4 stages, you should not make any big decisions in your life. So if you look at the story of Elijah, how many of those 4, hungry, angry, lonely, and tired, do you think he was? All of them, exactly. He was hungry. That's why God, the first thing that he does, instead of just talking to Elijah and try to put some sense into him, what he does is, "I'm going to feed you." He sends the angel twice. "Here's some bread, here's some water, because you're hungry." He's tired. "Okay, take a nap. Better take 2. And so he addressed those 2, hungry and tired. We'll see later how Elijah was also lonely in his speech, in his response. He will say, I'm alone, and how he was also angry with the people of Israel. So God is going to address those four and get Elijah in a place where he's ready to have a conversation. Because have you experienced maybe trying to have a productive conversation with someone? It can be your spouse, it can be a kid, it can be a friend, and he's in one of those four stages. He's either too hungry or tired or lonely or angry. And it's not a productive conversation. You can say the words, it can be logical, it can make all the sense to you, but the other person is not ready to receive because of his or her emotional state. And you can also probably remember times when it was you who was too hungry or tired or lonely or angry to receive any words of encouragement or guidance or wisdom. And we see here, the first thing we need to do is just take a break, take care of those physical needs first, which are important as highlighted, and this is the first point of the passage. And then we will be ready to have a productive conversation. So if that is the case with one another in horizontal relationship, it's the same with God. What God wanted to do the same. I'm going to take care of you, your basic needs, and then we will talk. So here's some food, take a nap, and like my daughter, hopefully will take a nap. And so then what does he do next after Elijah wakes up the second time and he eats and is strengthened? What he does is he sends Elijah for a walk, a 40-day walk to the Mount of Horeb. So if you remember, the Mount of Horeb has some significance in the Old Testament. What other person also went to the Mount of Horeb? Mount Horeb or Mount Sinai is the same one. It's two different names. Moses, exactly, Moses. Also 40 days in the wilderness, same mount. So God is sending Elijah. He's setting up a meeting between Elijah and himself, exactly there. So can you imagine what was going on through Elijah during those 40 days that he was walking? It says day and night, a journey that he was walking, strengthened by that food. And he was probably thinking, what am I going to say to God when I meet him at the mount? What should I say to explain, reason my case for why I'm meeting him and why am I in this situation? And incidentally, it was not the first time that God had provided miraculously for Elijah's need. If you read the story in 1 Kings 16:18, you see that Elijah has a really interesting life because he was one of the only faithful prophets in the kingdom of Israel, where everyone was just prone to idolatry, and he was persecuted. He was just running from place to place. So at one point, he went to live in the wilderness by a river, the brook of Cherith, and God had commanded the ravens to feed him meat in the morning and bread, meat in the morning and bread in the evening. So he was providing throughout Elijah's life miraculously, never leaving him alone. Another time, just right after that, he went to Sidon, to a city there, and he was sustained by a widow. And God made that the olive in the jar and the flour also in the jar did not diminish or became empty for many days, so that they would have that sustenance. So we see God providing for Elijah. And then Elijah goes on this journey, strengthened by that food, and gets ready to meet God at Mount Horeb. So we've seen that Elijah, he was at his lowest. He was going through a valley. He came from the Mount Carmel. He was going to Mount Horeb or Sinai. Good. Okay, good. We're still awake. We're not in that tire of the halt. Some people may be already hungry or angry or lonely or tired, so just try to come back. Okay? So Elijah was going through that valley. It's not a literal valley between like Mount Carmel and Mount Horeb. I'm just meaning a metaphorical valley. Same as when David writes Psalm 23, and he says, "Even though I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me." So this is a similar situation in which Elijah was walking, he felt lonely, all his enemies against him. And God was still there in the middle of the trouble. He did not abandon Elijah. So, God provides for our needs. Second point that we will see is when Elijah arrives at Mount Horeb, it says he spends the night there, and then the voice of the Lord comes to him, and he asks, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" So then Elijah replies, he will give his probably 40 days thought of response of, "I have been very jealous for the Lord, the God of hosts. For the people of Israel have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. And even I, am left, and they seek my life to take it away." So that's how he felt. That's the reply that he gave. That's why I'm here, because I'm lonely. I'm the only faithful prophet of the Lord, and they want to kill me as well. So they are your people. They have forsaken you. What are you going to do about it? And we see from this answer that he felt lonely. He says, "I'm the only one left." Not only that, but even they want to take my life away. So I'm being persecuted by basically the entire nation of Israel. So he felt lonely. He felt angry with the people of Israel. So remember the acronym HALT, hungry. God had addressed already. He provided food. Tired? Yeah, he took 2 naps. Though he came from a 40-day walk, so he could take probably another nap. But lonely, he says, "I'm the only one left." And angry, "While your people have forsaken your covenant and they have killed your prophets." So we see clearly he was all of those 4 and probably more. We could probably add a couple letters to the acronym. But God is addressing them one by one to get Elijah ready to a place where, okay, now we can talk. So the next thing that God does when he asks, "What are you doing here?" and Elijah replies, God says, "Okay, go out and stand on the mount before the Lord." Because remember, at this point, Elijah has been safe in the cave where he spent the night when he just arrived. So he was in the cave, and now God is saying like, "Okay, come out and we'll talk." And before Elijah comes out, we will see some things that happens. And I will read verses 10 and 11 in chapter 19. And it says, after Elijah replied, "Behold, the Lord passed by in a great and strong wind, tore the mountains, and broke in pieces the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. Then after the wind, there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, the sound of a low, gentle whisper." And we're going to stop there first. So we see 3 natural phenomena, and they have things in common. They all had in common the display of a wonderful power of God. They show that God, as the sovereign, He's the creator. He's always in control of the creation of everything that happens around us. But notice that God was not in any of them, in the wind, the strong wind, the earthquake, the fire. They are powerful displays of God's power, but God was not in there. And notice the contrast between those 3 and what comes after, the gentle, low whisper. And the first 3, they were powerful demonstrations, and we could even say that they were sort of dangerous. If you think every year, especially as we approach summer, the danger of wildfires, the danger of hurricanes, especially in the States, the danger of earthquakes. We experienced a couple months ago, right? There were some near Victoria. So would you say those are probably not desirable, that they are dangerous in some sort? They are. They are more destructive, we would say, than productive. But then comes a low, gentle whisper. And you see the contrast. This whisper is gentle. It's not a dangerous thing. So when Elijah hears this whisper, that's when he wraps his face in the cloak, and he went out and stood at the entrance of the cave, because he recognized God was not in the first 3, but now God is speaking. In this gentle whisper, that's where I'm going to hear God's voice. And he came out to the entrance of the cave, and behold, there came a voice to him and said, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" So that's exactly the same question that before, when he arrived the first time at the mount, God says, "What are you doing here?" Elijah gave his response. And then God asks again, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" And Elijah says exactly the same thing. "I have been very jealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the people of Israel have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets. With the sword, even I only am left, and they seek my life to take it away." So we see that up to this point, Elijah had been safe inside the cave. But then Elijah comes out. He stands at the entrance of the cave like the Lord had commanded him. He heard the gentle whisper, and he knew it was God's presence. So why do you think he wraps his face in the cloak that he was wearing? Why would he do that? Because he didn't do that for the first three, the fire, the earthquake, and the wind. Was it for protection? Do you remember someone else that did something similar? When he meets God, Moses at the burning bush, you recognize this is holy ground. This is a holy place. I'm encountering the Lord, the God of hosts, as Elijah calls him. So out of reverence and humility, he wraps his face. There is a similar encounter in Exodus 33 or 34, I believe. Very interesting to read. I will leave that up to you. I'm not going to read that. But I saw many similarities with that as well. So we've seen this pattern of repetition of identical sets of question from God, answer from Elijah, and then question and answer, exactly the same. But in between this sandwich of question, answer, what happened in between the two? When the strong wind, the earthquake, and the fire. So God is showing Elijah his power. He is in control. He's sovereign over all the creation. But Elijah doesn't change his answer. He says exactly the same. Okay. So it is a common experience in our life that we go through up and downs, the same as we said at the beginning. We go through seasons where we feel strong and ready and capable to take on any challenge. Like you could do any projects that they could throw at you and you would be successful. But then we also go through the valleys and we experience we are ready to give up. We feel disappointed with life. We feel like we're not accomplishing what we wanted, and we are ready to just give up, and like Elijah. But we need to understand, even though God, because He created us, He understands our up and downs, He doesn't go through those changes. He is the big I am, present, always the same. God is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. So for him, his power is always the same. Like they say in the Old Testament, also in Isaiah, the arm of the Lord is not shortened at any moment. He's always powerful to save. So nothing takes him by surprise. And what God is doing here in the second point, after he's providing for his needs of rest, taking a nap, feeding him, now he's giving him a chance to vent, to express his emotions, like, "Tell me, Elijah, what's going on?" And I will ask again, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" So we see, it seems for some of us counterintuitive and almost non-Christian when we think of complaining to God. Because maybe we remember that verse in Philippians 4 that says, "Rejoice in the Lord always." I will say it again, rejoice. Philippians 4. And then we think like we always have to be happy and wearing a smile no matter the circumstances of our life, right? Some of you have been brought up that way. Maybe you've seen people around you that believe that's the only possible response in the Christian life, is just to be happy, to rejoice in the Lord. But that's not really the meaning of rejoice in the Lord. Because you see, as Elijah and as David, you know that how many of the Psalms are considered Psalms of lament? 40 to 50% of them. So almost half of all the Psalms that you read are Psalms where somebody is complaining about something, right? So things are not right. I'm expressing my sorrow, my disappointment, my sadness. There's some that you read and it's like David saying, "I water my bed with my tears all night." And it's like, wow. things like that. Or remember, Psalm 22 is a great example when David says, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me from the words of my groaning? Oh my God, I cry by day, but you do not answer, and by night, but I find no rest. And that would almost seem like, wow, that's accusatory of God. David, what are you saying? Why have you forsaken me? But do you know who else quoted that very psalm? Jesus on the cross, right? My God, why have you forsaken me? So David at this moment was expressing his emotions. This is how I feel. I feel like you abandoned me. I feel anxious. I feel defeated. Or like Elijah, I feel just ready to die. Like, just take me already. And that's okay. We need to understand that is okay. It's okay to vent our emotions, to express to God how we feel. In fact, it's not only okay, but God wants to hear from us. That's why he's given Elijah this chance to, he asked him twice, what are you doing here? Tell me how you feel, how you really feel, right? So, and Elijah does, like, okay, I'll give it to you. But notice how God, at any point in this passage, chapter 19, he never is going to rebuke Elijah and say, like, hey, what are you saying? Like, that's not true. That's not really accurate. Was I not there just yesterday on Mount Carmel with you? No, he doesn't even mention that. So God does not rebuke us from expressing our feelings. And incidentally, you remember that I said, that verse, rejoice in the Lord, always, at all points. That's Philippians 4. So a couple verses after, in Philippians 4 as well, it says, do not be anxious about anything, but with prayer and petition and with thanksgiving, present your request to God. So there are some ways in which it is appropriate for us to express, it says, with gratitude, with thankfulness, but we can come with all of our emotions, with anything that is inside our heart to God and just give it to Him with that thankfulness, with that gratitude. And we don't have to feel like, oh, I need to suppress negative feelings, sadness, anger. Like, that's not Christian. No, we're humans. We just deal with that and we bring it to God. And He understands us. As we're seeing in the first point, God understands with His faithful servants are lonely, tired, when they're ready to give up, and He deals with us. So what we saw in this second point is that God is a patient listener. God is a great listener, and He wants to hear from us. Even though He knows what's going on, He's always going to ask you, what is going on? Tell me. So right at the end, the last 4 verses, we see when God actually replies with words. Because up to this point, God has been replying by providing food, by providing rest for Elijah, by listening to him. So God is answering, but now He's going to answer with words. And we're going to see what God says in the last 4 verses. And God is going to speak truth and purpose into Elijah's life. Notice how it's not rebuke, it's truth and purpose. So we start at verse 15 to 18, and it says, and the Lord said to him, go, return on your way to the wilderness of Damascus, and when you arrive, you shall anoint Hazael to be king over Syria, and Jehu the son of Nimshi you shall anoint to be king over Israel. And Elisha the son of Shaphat of Abel-Meholah you shall anoint to be prophet in your place. And the one who escapes from the sword of Hazael shall Jehu put to death. And the one who escapes from the sword of Jehu shall Elisha put to death. Yet I will leave 7,000 in Israel, and all the knees that have not bowed to Baal, and every mouth that has not kissed him. So interesting what we see here. God is talking about some people that Elijah is going to encounter as he continues his ministry. But what I see in God's response is that He's saying, Elijah, 3 things. First thing, you have work to do. Just go back the way you came. You have work to do. I have a mission for you. In fact, 3 missions. I'm going to give you a task. So He's saying, you may feel defeated. You may feel that after that, all the years that you've been faithfully serving me, nothing has changed. People are still idolaters. They have turned their back on God. But what God is saying, your ministry is not over. I'm still with you. I'm going to keep using you. And you still have a purpose to keep living. So, number one, you have a purpose, you have work to do. Number two, God is saying, I'm going to make things right. Because one of Elijah's concerns, when you see in his reply, is that he's saying, people have killed your prophets, they have destroyed your altars, they have abandoned you. And it would almost imply to say, and you have done nothing so far. But God is now saying, I will make things right. Because God does not tolerate the unrighteousness to go unpunished. He is going to bring judgment. And he's going to correct what is crooked. Notice how that includes even the king of Israel. That he's, by saying, you're going to anoint this one instead of the king that you have right now, Ahab, that evil king that was worse than all the other ones before him, you're going to anoint a new king. So that brings hope to Elijah. He's saying, this is not going to continue forever. I'm going to make things right. I'm going to bring my judgment. So you don't worry. Have you ever feel like that in your life? Like you see around you, and it seems that the wicked prosper, the people that do the most evil things are the ones that rise to the top. They have the most success in money and in their jobs and everything when they don't play a fair game. And God is saying to Elijah, that's not going to continue forever. I'm not going to allow the unrighteousness to go unpunished. So you have work to do, you have a purpose. I will make things right. And the third thing that he addresses is one of the 4 letters in that acronym. You are not alone. God reveals to Elijah that in fact, even though he felt alone as the only faithful servant of the Lord, there are other 7,000 people that are also faithful servants of God, and that they have not bowed their knees to the Baal or has not kissed that idol that God they have not served. They have been faithfully serving God. So God is addressing all the complaints that Elijah had, not in a way that he's condemning or rebuking. He's just speaking truth and purpose into Elijah's life. You may feel defeated, but there's so much more for you to still keep living. And here's some truth. You're not alone. There are other faithful servants of the Lord. And I will make things right. I will bring my judgment. And we have seen in this encounter so far that Elijah was at one of his lowest points in his life, probably. He was just ready to die. And God provided for his need, his physical needs, rest, sleep, food, water. He also listened to Elijah patiently as he needed to vent his frustration, and God just listened. He didn't rebuke Elijah. And finally, God reminded him of the truth of who he is as God, his sovereign power with the phenomenon that he displayed, and that he is in control, and the purpose. He has a purpose still for Elijah. And that God would still accompany him even as he went through the valley, same as the psalmist, King David. So you know the story of Elijah, how it ended? Elijah continued in his ministry. He continued to serve the Lord. And when he was ready to give up and die, God still used him as a faithful servant. He continued to live and live and live and live because he didn't die. So he was one of the only 2 people in the Bible that actually didn't die. If you remember that, he was just taken up to heaven in a chariot of fire. So the other person is for you to look who it was. It's in Genesis. Okay? Another interesting thing, when Jesus transfigured on the mount with his disciple, his chosen group of 3, John, James, and Peter, right? Who was there? Who appeared there on the mount beside Jesus? It was Moses and Elijah, exactly. We see many similarities between the 2 of them. That's also for you to research on your free time. Just read Exodus 33. But very interesting how God continued to use his servant. It was not, okay, you are damaged good already. You wanted to die and you were doubting and having faith issues. Okay, I will just, it's not that God said, okay, I will appoint another prophet in your place. You just get out of the way. That's not what's happening here, as some people would think, that Elisha was just a replacement for Elijah, like version 2.0. That's not what's going on. It's God speaking purpose and saying like, hey, your ministry is going to continue. And even after you go, because I will take you, there will be no end, because Elisha, I have provided someone for you to continue the work. So isn't that something beautiful? It's like when you see in your own life, your own kids will continue likely or hopefully the work that you've been doing. In some ways, you leave like a heritage, a legacy. That's a better word. Okay. So it was for purpose and for truth and encouraging words. It's not to say you're damaged goods, you're not good anymore. It's to say, I'm still going to use you. You're still here at the center. I'm going to use you because I am the one doing the work. It's not you. You may feel defeated, useless, that you're at a low point, but God says, hey, I'm still the same. Remember, I'm a sovereign creator. Nothing has changed. I'm still going to use you. And we will make things right. You're not alone, and you still have a purpose. So I hope that for your own life, when you go through those up and downs, when you go through those valleys, that you can see and pay attention to how God is providing, even just for your physical needs. We sometimes take that for granted. I think I took for granted the sleep. I used to sleep, I confess, 10 hours every night. How's that? It's straight. And my wife the same. Like, yeah, it was wonderful. And now, since October, we have a beautiful baby. And she still wakes up every 2 to 3 hours at night. So I sleep, if I'm lucky, maybe 6 hours in total, like adding up 2 hours here, 1 hour here. So, yeah, you sometimes take things for granted. And the physical things we take for granted. Food, shelter, taking a nap, all those things are God's way also of taking care of our needs, of getting us out of that HALT acronym, hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. I'm going to help you by releasing you soon so that you can go eat. So that will help with tired and hungry. But see how God is also doing that in your life. Second point, see how God is a patient listener and not just passive. He asks you as you meditate and you have your devotionals, you will encounter, especially if you read the Psalms, an invitation to pour your heart. Or like Paul, do not be anxious about anything. Just give it to God with thanksgiving. Just bring all your petitions and requests to Him. So that's an invitation for you also as you go through highs and lows, both. We can also celebrate. Just bring it to God and have a conversation with Him, and He will be the most patient listener. And in the end, He's not just passive, He's also going to speak to you through the word of other people as well that speak wisdom and purpose into your life, same as Elijah. He's going to tell you that you have a purpose and that you're not alone and that He's sovereign and He will make things right in your life as well. So to finish, I want to finish with this passage from 1 Peter 5, 6 and 7. And Peter says, humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, so that at the proper time He may lift you up, casting all your anxieties on Him because He cares for you. And I hope that you saw how that was the overarching theme of the sermon. God cares for His servant as we go through the valley. He cares by providing for our needs, by being a patient listener, and by speaking truth and purpose into our lives. So another application is go and do the same for others. We can also do the same that we receive. We can also go and speak truth, but also one important thing that I noticed in the passage, notice the order. God does not first speak purpose and truth into Elijah's life and then feeds him a meal and then sends him into a nap. He does the opposite, okay? So if somebody is really in an emotional state that is not ready to have a conversation or they're really low, let's look at this example. Let's provide for the needs that they have. Get them ready. Get them out of that acronym, HALT. Be a patient listener. They have so much they want to get out of them. It's okay to vent, as we say. It's not only okay, it's good. And third, then is when we're ready to have a conversation and speak purpose and truth into their lives. So I hope that was encouraging for you. So.